Hi, this is Pastor Cindy, and I'm here to do a new segment that I thought might be interesting to answer some of your questions about the Bible or about God at the best I can. And the first question I received from someone is, are all sins equal in God's eyes? How can saying a curse word be as bad as murder? In order to answer that question, we have to first define sin. And I think it causes some confusion because there are different definitions of sin. And we begin by looking at Webster's dictionary, which defines sin as an offense against religious or moral law. So there would be different offenses against different laws, which would be where we understand the difference in a curse word sin or a murder sin. But the Bible defines sin, the Bible dictionary defines sin as really a riddle, a mystery, a reality that eludes definition. It's very difficult to even comprehend the meaning of the word sin. Sin includes the failure to do what is right. But who defines what is right? God. Sin ultimately then is a rebellion against God or choosing self over God. So to define sin in that way, we're not talking about sin as being something that we do that's against the law. Sin would be any type of rebellion against God or choosing ourself over God. So when Adam and Eve chose their self over God and their rebellion caused sin to come into the world, then we, being descendants of Adam and Eve, have all inherited that. It's a part of our DNA. They chose that for their lives, and then they passed that down from children, generation to generation, from one group of children to another. And we've all inherited the desire to choose ourselves over God. And thus we all sin. We are all born with the tendency to be selfish people. And so we are then all born with that selfishness, and the only answer for that is God. We can't repair our DNA. We can't fix that. And there's no doctor around that can fix it. There's no medical remedy that can fix it. Only God can transform our DNA, or transfer our deepest part, our deepest part of who we are, to make us into non-selfish people who would focus on God rather than ourselves. So then that would transform us from sinful people to godly people. And that transformation happens over time and won't ever be finished while we're here on earth. But we work on that. God works continually on that transformation in us if we come to God and pray, I want to do your will, and I want to do your will over my own. I ask you to forgive me for my rebellion of sin, that the sin of choosing self over you. Help me, Lord, to become new. Help me to focus on what your will is and not my own. And so there are different levels of selfishness, and there's different consequences for different behaviors. But those consequences, again, then would be back to looking at breaking laws and consequences for breaking those laws. And that would be in a different category than the sin of selfishness, the sin of rebellion against God. And so I would define sin as the rebellion against God, and I would define breaking moral codes as breaking the laws. And so those are two different things. And so breaking the law of a curse word is much different than breaking the law of killing another person. The only thing I can find in Scripture to tell us what some of those consequences might even be for breaking laws is in Matthew chapter 18, verse 6, in the New Testament, talking about breaking laws. In the Old Testament, there's a lot, but in the New Testament, I'm sorry, the consequences for a behavior is, as for whoever causes these little ones who believe in me to trip and fall into sin, it would be better for them to have a huge stone hung around their necks and be drowned in the bottom of the lake. Little ones, meaning a servant of God, anyone who believes in me, it says, to fall into sin, to fall away from God and back into rebellion. It's not falling into breaking laws or being a lawbreaker, but to fall into rebellion. Then that person would have some very dire consequences in their lives. And whether that consequence happens here on earth or whether that consequence happens after death, I don't know. And I don't know where the consequences for breaking laws occurs. It does occur here on earth because there are laws against on our courts against some of the things that we're talking about. But for all of the laws that we're talking about, of saying curse words, saying things we shouldn't say, gossip, all of those things, I don't know where the consequences for those things are meted out according to God's law. And so whether that's meted out after our death or here on earth, we have to pay consequences because we don't have God's blessings upon us. I can't really answer that question. And so I've decided in my own life that that's all in God's hands. And it's really a good thing because I don't want it to be in my hands. I don't want to be the one to have to decide those things. And so I'll leave that all up to God. But as far as understanding how God judges sin, we need to understand what sin is. And the sin that God's talking about, and we talk about when we're talking about coming to God and asking forgiveness, is the sin of rebellion. The sin of rebellion against God and against God's will. So I hope that helps. And next time we'll find another question and hopefully some more answers. Talk to you later.